Hello everybody, I'm your host Tony Visco, and a little raspy voice right now, but it'll get cleared up, I'm sure. We're gonna do a tree scene. We're gonna do a scene of this is all about trees. It's all about putting together the study of trees. Deciduous trees are not going to be part of this. We're going to do conifer trees, needle trees, spruce and fir and pine and those kinds of things. And I'm going to do it as a mountain scene back here with some trees in the foreground. So I've done this this piece on my live classes, and I thought it might be interesting to do for us here. This was done specifically because people had asked about how to handle greens and how to handle trees and so forth and so on, how to handle specifically the conifer type tree. So what I'm doing is I'm just basically coming in here and roughing this in. My reference material is the work that I've done, but just giving me a little bit of time here. We'll rough this in and then I'll send it off to you so that we can do it. Okay, so this is going to be basically sort of a mountain sort of coming down, and the trees are going to be growing vertically. Coming down here, there's a bank down to a ravine where there's some rapids. So we'll do this, and we're going to end up maybe putting a sort of a big rock here. I'm sort of designing this as I go. So we have light coming in this way, so there's going to be sort of shadow behind the rock here and up in this area here. And some of this is going to be dark, and we're going to go, as we go off into the distance, our trees are going to, the sunlight is going to be hitting back from the upper right to lower left, so it's going to be lighter as we get back into this area here. So we're going to come down and make it around here, and we got some stuff that's going off in the distance. And let me just pull this over a little bit more because I don't like to be dead center. About right here, we'll come into the foreground and put a nice pine tree in here, in this area here. Again, we're going to go uphill. We'll do a couple of close pines or firs. And I know I'm probably not doing this dark enough, but I think that you can see what I'm doing is I'm moving my pencil that I'm sketching in with is basically moving in lazy Z shapes, because it's the ends of these trees literally that are going to tell us what kind of a tree it is. That it's not going to be inside here. We're not going to define anything inside. It's all going to be on the ends. So we're going to just come in here and give you maybe a trunk of this tree here, and maybe another trunk back here. And we want this to be an interesting shape back in this area here. Maybe we'll put another tall pine in this area here. Pines grow a little bit different than spruce or fir or those kinds of things here, at least in general. All right, so that's coming up here. This is coming down. There's a rapid in here, a water rapid. Water coming down in this area here. And we'll make this round. Let's see, we'll make this here so that we'll put some rocks, rocks. Maybe put a big rock right here. Rock. And of course this will be the area here where I'll start to come up. We'll start to come up with my, again, hill coming down this way, but this is all going to be in the foreground. This is going to be background, not as far back as here, but this is going to be background. And we're going to end up, we'll do some foreground looking brush in this area here. Trees, again, scattered, maybe we'll do some scattered brush. We're going to come down. This is going to be sort of cliff-like as it comes down. What I'm thinking of doing is building some darks right in here. Maybe we'll make a light. Maybe we'll do a light tree right in here. So we're going to build darks around this. Let it come down a bit. We'll make all of this here dark. Hopefully we'll stand that tree out. A couple of little things here and there. So big, huge boulder. A couple of other small boulders in here. Boulders in here. Rushing water. The riverbank on the left side, riverbank on the right side coming down. Lights coming from this direction. Dark's going to be all over here. Here, lights hitting this, but this is all going to be dark in here. So, okay, that's my rough. We'll tape it up, and let's get some tape so it doesn't move anywhere. Though I think that's pretty good. Put some tape on there, and actually, because I'm going to wet the paper, what I'm going to do is tape it in the top. I don't want it to buckle too much. I want it, let's just do it like this, and then I'll fix the camera so that it's viewable. That's it, about like that. So we'll go over here, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Just convincing people. We don't have to be sort of accurate, other than to give you the illusion that these are the kinds of trees. These are conifer trees. You know, we have to be convincing, I guess. Okay, so anyway, here we go. So this is all set. Okay, so what's the first thing that we want to do? We want to wet the sky. I'm going to try to leave the area behind these trees here on the white side, on the lighter whitish side of the paper. So I'm just going to take my brush and wet this and leave some of that dry. I'm going to wet all this in here too. What I want to do is make sure that I'm leaving a little bit of this on the area over here. I'm going to leave this dry and come in with, I'm going to ultimately wet the whole paper except for what's going down here in terms of the rapids. What this, the waterway that's coming down. We don't want to wet that, but I'm going to come in here with, let's come in with the sky, and we'll come in with a little bit of cerulean blue and come across the page. Now I'm using my big brush. There's a lot of water in my brush, and there's a lot of water in my paint. All right, so it's watery paint, watery brush. Water. I didn't take the water out, and just putting some of this in and coming across. I'm going to turn this green anyway, so doesn't make any difference. But let me get a little bit more pigment in here. And what I'm going to actually do now is come down into this area, because I'm going to turn this all green, and I'm going to come down with cobalt blue. I'm adding cobalt blue to this. And what I'm going to do in this area, we're going to make it nice and bright. So, what does that mean? That means I'm going to come in with my new gamboge and wet this all. Okay, we're just going to come in here and give it, this is just new gamboge, and yeah, it looks a little bit greenish right now, and the reason for that is because I have some of my cerulean blue mixed in here. Which is fine. A little bit of cobalt blue, cerulean blue. We're going to come in here and we're going to make this area a little darker. This is wet now, understand, okay? So we're coming around here. All right, so we've got a little bit of light going on over here. A little bit of my new gamboge is being put into this area right here. What area is that? This is this area right here, but a little bit more on the darker side. And as I come down here, I'm going to get a little bit cooler. So the cooler yellow is going to be put in down in this area here. Cool yellow is my new Naples yellow, and in this area I'm going to come over here with a little bit of yellow ochre. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is I'm going to start pulling some color out, pulling some of this stuff out of here. This basically is my background. All right, I'm just setting up my tones, setting up my background for a background color. Now I'm going to come in and wet my brush, and I'm using my 1-inch brush right now, taking the water out of the brush, and I'm sort of coming in and saying, okay, I have a platform, or a plateau. I shouldn't say a platform, but a plateau about right here. I want this to be lighter because we got the sun coming down, so we're going to lift some of this out of here, make it lighter. Interestingly enough, we have this I'm going to make darker in this area here, but I want to lighten up. I definitely want to lighten up this tree here. So we're going to add some just water in here and take the water out. All right, we're going to add a little bit of water and remove it. We can remove it a number of ways. One way is just simply using tissue. One way was the brush. So sometimes I like to come in here and take just tissue and remove actually gives me a better feel. All right, so we're going to remove some of that right in this area, and I'm going to come over here and also do the same thing. I'm going to take my tissue, put some water in the tissue, wet it, come in here, and some of these trees are not light, but brighter. Some of them are darker, some of them are going to be brighter. lighter. Okay, so I'm just giving that, taking some of this out of there. Again, taking some of that out. And coming back here and making this a little bit lighter as well. So it's light. The idea behind here is to lighten up. I put my value in. This is going to be warmer, a little bit on the cooler on this side, because we're going to end up using yellow ochre a lot. Some of these areas. Add a little bit of blue in it. And we're going to start to build on these trees back here too, and these areas over here. So basically what we're doing is we're just coming in here, and I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre with a little bit more heavier pigment in these areas here. See, a little heavier pigment. The pigment that I'm using, the consistency of the pigment I'm using with my yellow ochre is more like heavy cream in here. And some of these areas here, we'll put it in, and I'll take a little bit of my burnt sienna up here as well. I'm going to put some spots in. Now, again, my trees are growing vertically. You know, even they don't shoot out of the mountain this way. The mountain goes up, and it's going to always grow. The trees are going to grow vertically. So we'll put just a couple of spots in there. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to balance this off a little bit. A little bit of yellow ochre down here, and then just give it a little bit of wipe. And I'm going to add some, we're going to go back to my cobalt blue here. My cobalt blue, and I'm going to mix it with my burnt sienna and yellow ochre. And we're going to end up starting to put in some heavier color. All right, so burnt sienna, a little cobalt blue. Now the consistency here is pretty thick, pretty much like heavy cream. Okay, see this heavy cream? And we're going to just start to come in and build. The paper's, remember, the paper's still damp. If I put a lot of water in this paper, it's going to eat. I'm going to eat at the pigment that's already there. I'm going to show you that in a second, because I'll do it for you just so that you can see what I'm talking about. But I'm putting this really heavy stuff in right now, and I'm not going to do it everywhere, but I'm going to do it so that I start to look. We're going to start to look like getting. It's going to start to form what will look like. Hopefully, what will look like trees. A little bit bluer in some cases. This is just a massive value, dark values that are in there. Okay, so we're creating the illusion of some tree work that's going to be in here. We're going to end up doing a darker tree over here. And this is a delicate balance. I'm just touching, I'm using my flat brush. This is a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch brush. I'm using the tips of this to put my paint down. Okay. So we'll get a little bit more cerulean blue in here. Now, why am I'm changing up the color a little bit? Well, that creates more interest. That's why I'm doing that. Okay, it creates a little bit more interest. And running some lights and darks in here. I'm leaving a lot of this stuff is going to be left light. The reason for that is because the actual image, if I remember correctly, the actual image that I was working from, that I started with this, when I looked at it, was very dark. And I wasn't too comfortable with the real dark areas. So what I'm doing is I'm just creating I'm painting a painting. I'm not copying reference material so much. I'm using the reference material, but I'm still painting the painting. All right. So I'm getting some interesting, hopefully some interesting lights and darks that are going on in here. I'm also going to do the same thing with some of these trees, only I'm going to do them a little bit more like with the consistency here. I'll give you an idea of it right now. See this wetter area? This is more like milk as opposed to heavy cream. My colors I'm just using is the same colors. I'm using a little bit of cobalt blue, a little bit of cerulean blue, cobalt blue, mixed up together along with my yellow. I'm taking a little bit of lemon yellow on this case here, adding it in and making it a little bit duller, a little bit flatter, a little bit more watery. And we're going to come in here, and I've got my real light colors, but I'm going to come in and I want to start to put in a little bit of more darker values and greener. Okay. Little touches. I'm doing these little tiny, for me, the way to do this is these little Z shapes. There's a lot of ways to do needle trees, but this is one of the ways that I've found that it works for me. Okay, so we're just sort of doing something like that up in those areas there, and then we're going to just bring some of this down, and I'm going to come in here with a little bit more cobalt blue, but on the light side. A little bit of cobalt blue, but bring it down on the light side. It's going to be darker down in this area here. Darker and sort of more watery. Here, I'll tell you what, we'll use a little lavender. I'll show you. We'll use a little bit of lavender and get it a little bit softer. Okay, so we'll do something like get some of this lavender in here, which is fun to work with. Now, again, I'm coming down and I've got to be cognizant of what's happening right here because I want a very light valued pine tree in here. So the only way that I can do that is to leave it white, leave it light, and put in some of this value around it, little darker values around it. And the darker values are simply the same mixture that I had. I'm using my burnt sienna, cobalt blue mixture, but more pigment. This is okay, more pigment. We can start to see my lighter tree coming in here. And I'm going to bring some lavender in down in this area here too. But see, notice I'm lightening it up, or making it lighter. A little cobalt blue with my lavender. But wet, watery. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is to get you, in this area right here, I'm trying to build some value that's going to be called coming forward. I'm going to make a lot of this darker. This is all going to recede in the background a little bit more. It's a little bit too wet right there. Gotta wait a bit on those. Okay, we got a little. What I'm doing here is this is putting in some little tiny, well, strokes. These strokes are going to be representative of some tree trunks. Now, when you're doing this, the thing that you want to remember is that you don't want to do these. You want to do these so that they're clustered shapes. You don't want to do it as a shape of tree, a trunk space, trunk space, trunk space. You want to cluster those. And again, light water sometimes is absolutely wonderful. The way to put a lot of this stuff in here. Let me show you something else too. If I take a little bit of water, and I actually end up coming in here and I do a little bit of spritzing like this. Let's see what it'll end up. What I wanted to do is, what I want to create is some water spatter that'll eat at the pigment, and some of it'll get that tree-like quality, the needle leaves and so forth. If it's too wet, it's just going to be wet into wet. It's not going to work. So we're looking at this sort of hazy sort of look. This is very interesting. Well, we're still not detailed yet. We're not getting into detail yet. This is still background stuff. Okay, we're just what we're really doing is just putting in some darks and lights that will represent ultimately this landscape that we're building. Okay, so down here in this area along the water's edge, we need to make this darker. And the reason for that is because you want to hit, light's going to come down on the top, and you want that edge of the bank before you hit the water to be a little bit on the darker side. And then what we're going to do is take I'm going to take this brush here, which is a dagger brush, and just softly come in and pull this up a little bit. Okay, now this angle, what I'm doing here is my approach is to be able to give you the illusion of this going uphill. And we'll do this with illusion is going uphill. Here's my yellow ochre. We're just going to go. Right? And all of that landmass is going to get lost in the forest. Now, we have a rocky coast before we hit the water down here. I want to put in some of this rocky area down in this area. It's just pebbled beaches, I guess is what I'm saying, really. You know, along the shore. I moved my light over a little bit. You might have seen just a little bit of an adjustment. Okay, so what I have is some interesting kinds of things right now, and I'm going to actually come in here and I'm going to put some spatter in this area. I want some spatter, and the reason for that spatter is because the spatter is it's easy. See, this is easier to deal with all the little darks and lights that go on in the tree areas where light starts to filter through. So you can create some of that with spatter, and it tends to be a little bit more interesting. This is a little bit on the wet side here. It's not going to be as effective, but okay. So we're just building some of that in, and we'll put some more stuff. We'll actually put more interest in there. Whoop, too dark. All right, some of this is going to be interesting spatter, and that's going to be part of. Hopefully, will be part of what our finished product is going to be. Okay, we can take maybe some of these and just work them out a little bit. A little water, but you want some of that in there because that spatter creates some real keen interest. And we usually do the spatter, block everything off and do it at the end, but I wanted to put in some right now. So we're starting to build even darker stuff. So I'm going to go in and get my French ultramarine blue, mix it with my burnt sienna. And remember, when I'm doing this, the more burnt sienna you put in, the warmer it's going to get, the more blue, the cooler. All right? But you're going to get some nice darks doing this. And this is going to help me to build a little bit more interest here. For instance, I'm going to build some dark needly like images, shapes. These are nothing more than marks or shapes that I'm putting in here. But these tiny needle kind of marks will give you the illusion, more the illusion of those pine trees that are, and fir trees. And it's just nothing more than delicately coming in here, picking up your brush, and moving this back and forth. With a little bit of practice, I guess, you know, to say that you can do this all the time, I mean, it does take a little bit of practice, there's no question. But again, I'm not painting trees so much as I'm painting the illusion of trees. I'm painting the characteristic shapes of these. And I've deliberately not fill this in. I like this painting to be a little bit lighter than it is dark, so I'm staying away from the real heavy dark that I'm using as a reference, or I was using originally as a reference when I did my online stuff. I'm sorry, when I did my live classes. But you see, I'm starting to do a little bit more darks in here. There's always darks among the light. You know, anytime you get into a situation like this, where you're building, and that's what we're doing, we're just building with just marks. But we're building these interesting patterns that are representative of needle trees, pine, fir, spruce, whatever. But we want to create these as interests as much. We want to put as much interest in this as possible, but I don't want to overdo it. You know. Now, my thinking is maybe just softer shapes in here. I want to build this one here real dark. So we're going to end up coming in here. I'm going to pick up my cobalt blue a bit. Build this up a little. And I want this to stand off against the one in the background here. All right, this is going to come right down into this guy here. It's going to be sitting right here in the bank. All right. Okay, and then we're going to end up topping this. All right, we've got that nice feeling right there. We're going to end up doing some darker areas in here. And we're going to change this up a bit by adding a little bit more of my yellow ochre. And I'm not necessarily trying to make this fall, but I do want to change up the value and the color a bit. Okay, now that's a little bit too light. Yep, I topped those trees, and that's a little bit too light. So I'm going to come in here and make this a little bit darker in here by doing some. I want to wet this a little bit more cobalt blue. Give that some, wet that a bit. Remember, I'm seeing through this too, so you want to leave some light in those areas, okay? Now I've lost all of the stuff down here. Just totally lost all of that. So we're going to come back in here and we're going to put some of that back in. If I want to make this tree here, if I want to make that a light tree, then I've got to be able to build around it, right? So what am I going to do is I'm going to just sort of paint negative shapes in here. And we'll splatter a little bit more in there too. All right, see? Maybe we'll just let that go. Let it just sort of run off a little bit. But we'll put the tree back in, make this thing here. We'll build. We'll build some in there. So we'll get that light tree again over there, and then maybe put some brushwork in here. So we've got this sort of mound of things that are going on here. I'm going to change that up a bit too. Move it. I don't want to move this around. Okay, so mass, dark mass, lighter mass. Over here, I want to fill this in a little bit more. And the reason for that is because we really do have a mountain, or we have a lot of this going back. So I'm going to end up filling this in a little bit more over here with some of my lavender. And maybe add a touch to that of my opera rose back here as well. Touch of opera rose to this. So it sort of goes off in a distance. Okay, we have that. All right, so that gives us the impression that all of these little trees way back here are really way off in a distance. And I'm going to make this all darker up. Run some of this dark area in here a little bit more. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to make put a few more darker trees. Again, I'm painting. What I'm doing here, guys, is I'm painting a painting. I'm not necessarily copying my reference material, but what I am trying to do is to give you something in here. Let's say we needed something that's over here that's maybe a dark tree in this area that's going to be around this boulder here. Okay, might work a little bit more. And what I'll do is maybe put some dark just shapes in here. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. This is still a little bit on the wet side. I don't know if we can scrape it out. It's still too wet to do that with. Okay, so now let's get back down into the nitty-gritty of what's happening here, because we have water coming down here. And I'm going to end up getting this cliff-like, put a little bit of a darker value in there. Enhance this a bit more. It's stuff in the foreground. Let that go a little bit right now. Not comfortable with what's happening here at all, but we'll fix that too. So what I want to do is I'm going to bring in some what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some trunks, and I'm going to bring the trunks up. Maybe I'm going to come up a little bit more here. We'll come up with a trunk there and a trunk here. Maybe one in here. And among that, we're going to take and we're going to put in some dark clusters to make that look a little bit more convincing. Okay. Same way with over here. We want these to be a little bit stronger in value against the light of the sky. Okay. All right, and then we're just going to soften this up in here a little bit more. Give it some, what's that, lavender. Just let it go. So in this case here, for instance, we also want to probably put in where this light is, maybe a couple of branches off that guy here. Now we start the detail kind of stuff. To sort of enhance a lot of this stuff, make it much more interesting. Okay. And is this dry enough? I'm going to try to scrape in a few little branches if I can. I can use my credit card, I can use the back of this. If it's too wet, it's not going to work. If it's too dry, it's not going to work. For instance, I can do it right in here. That's a little bit too wet, it's going to fill in. But you need a few of these. Now I'm actually degrading the paper here with this, because you see it's filling in dark. It's okay. I'm going to need a couple of those anyway. So I'm going to come over here and make some of this stuff a little bit darker, and then I'll actually come in and pull out. But I want to make some of this a little bit darker. So again, combination of cerulean blue, cobalt blue rather, burnt sienna, if I'm going to have this light, that tree trunk is going to get light, I need this to be darker behind here. So this is a little bit more carefully structured. All right, so I want that to be, I want those to be darker. Clusters. Clusters of branches. You got to get this fluid enough so that it'll move, but not so fluid as to it'll. And you need to create a nice, clean edge. Okay, so we got some trees going on up over in those areas. You can see that. Some nice dark, so we'll put a little bit of a cluster. I think I'm going to put a little bit of a cluster of dark right here. Okay, that's all I'm doing is I'm just sort of looking and balancing this stuff out, trying to do that anyway. I'm making this softer. See this one here? Not as hard, making it softer. Want it to set back a bit. Some lights, scrape some lights in. Because it's seeing through the, we're seeing through the trees, not everywhere, you don't have to do it every place, but we're seeing through. Well, this is basically a pleasing mass of darks and lights that are all sort of working together. Hopefully it'll work out pretty good. My boulders. Now, let's do one in here, do this in here too. We have, as I said, I don't want to get too involved. I'm going to spatter this a little bit in here. It'll give me more the effect that I want for my tree in the foreground, right? Still a little bit on the too wet. I could have just let it dry. Let's get the water in here. Okay. We have a stream of rapid water moving relatively quickly. And we have a bank. What do we have? We have this sort of interesting, let's use some brighter. Actually, I'm going to spatter some brighter colors in there too, but this is in shadow. Down in this area here. We're going to use some yellow ochre. All right. What do you think? Where are we at? Not bad. Not bad at all. What I want is just a little bit of hint of these stones and rocks and stuff like that. To make a little bit of a brighter area. Again, it's not necessarily that it's not necessarily that it's fall. I just want to make sure that we get this landmass. Here we got shadow. Hey, let me just do something else here too. We have a lot of shadow in here. If I can get this dryer, I can make sure. Let me see if I can get that dryer. I want to make this a little bit darker. And here, and I want to darken up this too. All right. Then I'm going to put a little bit of shadow. Oh, it's still too wet. Well, it looks like it's close to being done here, guys. I'll let this really actually dry out a lot. Dry brush. All right. Dark enough, dark enough, dark enough. Big shapes, large mass over here, lighter mass over here. We'll let this dry, and I think that once I'll take a look at it, and it looks like it's going to be pretty good. That's going to be our painting. I'm doing a little bit of, I'm going to add a couple rocks right here. Make one there. Rocks in the rapids. Perhaps one there, one here. defining some of these a little bit more. Little dark spots, not. We got one there, we got a couple in here. These are real sort of dark areas. This is just brush. This is a dry brush. Okay, we're just taking some paint and dry brush. Dry brush is not dry. The hairs of the brush are still wet. Oh, they're wet, they're damp. But it's basically pigment that's almost directly out of the tube, or it could be directly out of the tube too. Again, just enhancing some of these areas to make it a little bit more interesting. I want to make this a little bit more interesting. The bank. Now again, I'm not copying my reference material so much as I'm looking at my painting and I'm saying, what does it need for me to be convinced, make it a little bit more convincing? And I'm just doing a little bit of detail work here on these areas where these rocks are. We may have, let's see, I wonder if maybe we'll just put one big one right here. We can change these up a bit too. For instance, let's take a alizarin crimson. Well, we just did a lot of that. Maybe I won't take alizarin. I'll tell you what, I'll take a little bit of alizarin crimson and add my cobalt blue to it to make it a little bit more purple color, grayish. A little darker down there. Yep, okay. We'll come down. Some of the shadow stuff. All right, and then we'll see what we can do to maybe pull this. Maybe I'll pull this right off of here. Tell you what. I don't know, probably gonna get too busy here. Probably don't want to get too busy here. Let it go. Let it go, Tony, let it go. Let's see if I can get that scraped in a bit more. All right, I am thinking that we're done, my friends. That's it. I'm your host, Tony Visco. This is Painting for Pleasure. If you enjoyed this, tell your friends. We'd like to have more people over here. Put the word out. It's a lot of fun to do. So until the next time, just remember that we're all in here, not to be frustrated with this, but to enjoy it. So we want to keep in mind that we're always in here. We're just sort of, this is all about painting for pleasure. Have fun. See you next week. Bye-bye.